Welcome. Today, we're diving into an absolutely wild 50-year David versus Goliath battle over the very soul of American rock music. We're going to explore the unbelievable journey of Creedence Clearwater Revival, tracing how a band manufactured some of the most universally recognized music in human history, only to see that exact success fracture the group and trap their primary songwriter in a decades-long legal nightmare.
So what actually happens when the music industry decides you no longer own your own sound? I mean, it sounds completely absurd, right? But this is an unprecedented legal and creative anomaly that actually happened. We aren't just talking about a dispute over an unauthorized sample or a cover song here. We're talking about something much deeper and, honestly, far more surreal.
Just imagine this paradox for a second. A corporation suing a man for sounding exactly like himself. We're talking about John Fogerty, the driving creative force behind CCR, being dragged into federal court by his own former label, Fantasy Records, essentially for plagiarizing his own brain. To understand how we ever arrived at this bizarre reality, we really have to look at how this band was built in the first place.
Let's start by defining the sound that kicked off the whole shebang: swamp rock. This was a musical aesthetic blending these vivid Louisiana bayou narratives with aggressive, tight rock and roll. But here's the fascinating twist. The band that famously engineered this southern sound wasn't from the South at all. They were just a group of high school friends from El Cerrito up in Northern California. John Fogerty wrote extensively about riverboats and the backwoods with absolute conviction. But their actual day-to-day environment was the highways and rehearsal spaces of the Bay Area. And their work ethic? Man, it was just staggering. 3. That is the number of major studio albums CCR released in the single calendar year of 1969 alone. While other bands over in nearby San Francisco were exploring these long, cosmic, psychedelic sounds and taking up to 2 years to craft a single album, CCR operated as a highly disciplined, mechanical manufacturing center for hit singles. Massive hits like Proud Mary and Bad Moon Rising were essentially rolling off an assembly line. But get this, Fortunate Son? According to the sources, Fogerty actually composed that entire track in approximately 20 minutes. He managed to compress acute social anger into a tightly structured rock anthem in the time it takes most of us to decide what to watch on TV. This velocity of production was a massive financial asset for sure, but as we're about to see, it also became a profound pressure cooker. Section 1. Anatomy of a Collapse. The Burden of the Hit Factory. Okay, so this immense pressure, combined with John Fogerty's centralized control as the sole principal songwriter, arranger, and producer, really began to crack the band's foundation. To understand his intense perfectionism during this era, you have to look at the Woodstock refusal. CCR was actually one of the very first major acts to commit to the Woodstock Festival. But because of severe logistical delays, they were forced to play super late at night to a muddy, exhausted, and largely sleeping crowd. Well, Fogerty's internal standards were so strict that he voluntarily blocks the band's performance from the highly lucrative Woodstock documentary film and soundtrack. He literally removed his band from the most significant historical document of their era, just because the environment compromised their performance. This relentless pressure built into a surprisingly rapid collapse. Back in 1969, they were at absolute peak output, but the power dynamics and a total lack of shared creative input caused some really deep resentments. By 1971, John's older brother, rhythm guitarist Tom Fogerty, officially quits the band. Attempting a more democratic approach, the remaining members shared songwriting and vocal duties on their 1972 album, Mardi Gras. It was a critical and commercial failure, completely lacking the precise identity that had defined them. And by October 1972, Creedence Clearwater Revival officially called it quits. You know, for years, John Fogerty simply didn't understand why his bandmates were so angry with him. From his perspective, he was writing #1 hits and making them all massively successful. But years later, his wife Julie offered this profound little insight. She just said, well, they're jealous. It was a simple truth that finally helped Fogerty understand his bandmates' bitter frustration over their lack of creative agency. He was the undisputed leader, and that dynamic, while incredibly lucrative, had completely crushed the human element of the group. Section 2. The Contractual Trap. Sued for being himself. Sadly, the breakup of the band was really just the beginning of the nightmare. The music stopped, but the draconian contracts tied to Fantasy Records and label boss Saul Zaentz were still very much alive. To the corporation, the band members weren't artists. They were highly valuable infrastructure. To legally detach himself from that Fantasy Records contract in 1980, Fogerty made an extreme, gut-wrenching choice. He surrendered his artist royalties directly to Saul Zaentz. He essentially handed over the financial rewards of his life's work for 25 years, just to escape the corporate system that had trapped him.
But incredibly, the label still wasn't done with him. Fast forward to 1985. Fogerty returns to the charts with a massive solo hit, The Old Man Down the Road. And Fantasy Records, who owned the publishing rights to the old CCR catalog, initiates litigation. They actually claimed his new solo track was fundamentally a rewrite of his old CCR song, Run Through the Jungle. The corporate entity was legally trying to prohibit the original author from producing new music that shared his own established aesthetic. I mean, no way, right?
So, Fogerty fights back. He successfully defends himself against the infringement claim by proving a pretty obvious point: you can't plagiarize your own style. But it didn't stop there. This absurd situation escalated into Fogerty v. Fantasy, which became a landmark Supreme Court case. Fogerty countersued for his attorney fees and won, setting a definitive legal precedent that established exactly when a successful defendant is entitled to recover legal costs in federal copyright litigation. He quite literally changed intellectual property law. But beyond the courtroom victories, this era brought some incredibly deep personal tragedies. The business disputes had fractured his family permanently. During the bitter legal battles over royalties, his older brother Tom actually ended up siding with the label boss, Saul Zaentz. Tragically, Tom contracted HIV from a blood transfusion and passed away from AIDS complications in 1990. Our sources note that because of these deep legal and personal divides, the brothers never truly managed to reconcile before Tom's passing. In that same year, 1990, Fogerty experienced a massive turning point. He traveled down to Mississippi to visit the gravesite of the legendary bluesman Robert Johnson. Standing right there, he had this profound spiritual awakening. He realized that a true artist owns the spiritual rights to their music, regardless of what corporate paperwork says or what businessman happens to hold the contracts. That one powerful realization inspired him to finally start performing his old CCR material live again for his fans. Section 3. Reclaiming the Legacy, a 50-year miracle. After decades of estrangement, bringing this music back home took some absolute, genius-level orchestration. First, they had to patiently wait for the 50-year U.S. copyright reversion window to approach. Seeing this opportunity, his wife and manager Julie drafted a bold plan to purchase the publishing rights outright. They enlisted the help of music executive Irving Ossoff and partnered with Concord, the company that had since acquired Fantasy Records. Finally, in January 2023, the ultimate miracle actually happened. John Fogerty successfully purchased a majority interest in his worldwide publishing rights. If you track his level of control over the years, it's a wild ride. Back in 1968, as a young kid signing a highly restrictive contract, Fogerty's control over his own catalog was incredibly low. By 1980, after completely surrendering his royalties just to escape, it was effectively zero. But jump to 2023, maximum control. After a half-century, he bought back the very songs he wrote in his 20s, finally giving him a say in exactly where and how his music is used. When the deal went through, his reaction was just perfect. He said, "After 50 years, I am finally reunited with my songs. I happen to like the songs a lot." It's just such a joyful, profound statement from an artist who endured literal decades of suffering, litigation, and heartbreak just to finally own his own iconic compositions. And he's not just sitting on those rights either. He's exercising that ownership immediately in the most beautiful way. In 2025, Fogerty dropped a project titled The Legacy album. But this isn't just another compilation record. He entirely re-recorded the classic Creedence Clearwater Revival catalog, but this time, he played alongside his own sons. It's the ultimate act of present-tense ownership, taking the music back from the legal paperwork of the past and performing it joyfully with his family today. So, we're going to wrap up this explainer with a provocative question for you to chew on. Who truly owns the soul of a song? Is it the corporation holding the legal contract, or the artist with the voice and the pen? John Fogerty's unbelievable story of loss, perseverance, and ultimate redemption proves that while paperwork might hold a song hostage for 50 years, it can never truly own its soul. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, I highly encourage you to go listen to those classic tracks right now with a whole new perspective.